Horse protects abandoned kitten. What happens next is heartwarming. How will this story turn out? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall oak trees that bordered Clara's small farm, casting a golden glow over the dew-covered grass. The air was crisp, filled with the familiar sounds of chirping birds and the occasional whinny of her beloved horse, Thunder. At 27 years old, Thunder was no longer the spirited stallion he had once been, but he remained the heart of the farm, a steady, loyal presence that Clara cherished. Clara stepped onto the porch, a steaming mug of coffee warming her hands. She smiled as she watched Thunder grazing near the fence, his dark coat gleaming in the sunlight. "Good morning, old boy," she called, her voice soft but carrying easily across the quiet yard. Thunder flicked his ears in her direction, but didn't look up, too preoccupied with a patch of grass he had found. As Clara turned to head back inside, a sudden movement near the edge of the woods caught her eye. She squinted, trying to make out the small shape darting through the underbrush. It was quick, almost too quick to see, but something about it piqued her curiosity. Thunder noticed it too. His head lifted, his ears swiveling forward as he stared intently at the woods. Then, to Clara's surprise, he began to walk toward the fence, his steps slow and deliberate. Clara set her mug down and followed, her boots crunching on the gravel path as she approached. "Thunder, what is it?" she murmured, her heart skipping a beat as she saw what had captured his attention. Crouched just beyond the fence, half hidden in the tall grass, was a tiny kitten. Its fur was matted and dirty, and its wide eyes glimmered with fear as it stared up at the massive horse towering above it. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The kitten looked no older than a few weeks, its small body trembling with exhaustion. For a moment, Clara expected Thunder to retreat or even stomp in alarm, but the horse did neither. Instead, he lowered his massive head, his warm breath ruffling the kitten's fur. The kitten flinched but didn't run, its tiny claws gripping the ground beneath it. Clara approached cautiously, her heart swelling at the sight. "Well, aren't you a brave little one?" she said softly, kneeling near the fence. She reached out hand, but the kitten hissed, its back arching defensively. Thunder snorted gently, his nose nudging the kitten as if to reassure it. Clara smiled. "It seems like you've got a new friend, Thunder," she said. "Let's see if we can help." With Thunder standing watch, Clara carefully coaxed the kitten out of the grass. It was a slow process, the little creature's fear evident in every hesitant step it took. But Thunder's calm presence seemed to have a soothing effect, and eventually, the kitten allowed Clara to scoop it up. She cradled the tiny bundle in her hands, her heart aching at its frailty. "You've had a rough start, haven't you?" she murmured. The kitten mewed weakly, its eyes blinking up at her with a mixture of fear and hope. Clara carried the kitten back to the house, Thunder trailing close behind. Inside, she prepared a small bowl of warm milk and placed it on the kitchen floor. The kitten hesitated at first, but hunger quickly won out, and it began to lap at the milk with fervor. Thunder watched through the open kitchen door, his ears flicking as he observed the kitten. Clara chuckled. "You're awfully invested in this, aren't you?" she said. "Don't worry. We'll make sure your new friend is well taken care of." As the day went on, the kitten, whom Clara decided to name Whiskers, began to settle into its new surroundings. It remained wary, skittering away at sudden movements, but it always seemed to gravitate back toward Thunder. Whenever the horse was nearby, Whiskers would sit just outside the fence, its tiny body dwarfed by Thunder's massive frame. Clara couldn't help but marvel at their dynamic. Thunder, who had always been gentle but aloof with the other animals on the farm, seemed to have taken on a protective role. He stood near Whiskers whenever it ventured into the yard, his imposing presence a shield against anything that might pose a threat. That night, as Clara sat on the porch watching the stars, Thunder and Whiskers rested nearby. The kitten was curled up at Thunder's hooves, its small body rising and falling with each breath. Thunder stood over it, his eyes half closed but alert. Clara sipped her tea, a warm sense of contentment washing over her. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but seeing it embodied in such an unlikely friendship filled her with a quiet joy. "You're a good soul, Thunder," she said softly. "Both of you are." As the cool night air settled over the farm, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whiskers had found a home, and Thunder had found a companion. And in the process, Clara realized they had brought a little more light into her world. The following morning, Clara woke to the sound of faint meowing drifting through the open window. She smiled as she stretched, already guessing where Whiskers had gone. Sure enough, when she stepped outside onto the porch, she spotted the kitten nestled by Thunder's hooves once again. The sight made her heart swell. This unlikely friendship was becoming a routine. Thunder stood patiently, his dark eyes watching over the kitten as Whiskers pawed at the dirt. Clara chuckled. "You've certainly taken your role as guardian seriously, haven't you?" she called to Thunder. The horse flicked his ears at her voice, but his focus remained on the kitten. Clara brought out a small bowl of food for Whiskers, setting it down near the fence. Whiskers scampered over eagerly, its tiny tail sticking straight up as it ate. Clara leaned on the fence, stroking Thunder's muzzle. "I think this little one's going to be sticking around," she said. "And I don't think you mind one bit." Over the next few days, Whiskers began to grow more comfortable exploring the farm. The kitten's initial timidity gave way to a playful curiosity, and Clara often found it investigating new corners of the yard or chasing after insects in the grass. But no matter where Whiskers wandered, Thunder was never far behind. The horse seemed to instinctively know when the kitten needed him, stepping in with quiet authority whenever Whiskers seemed uncertain or scared. One afternoon, Clara watched from the porch as Whiskers approached the chicken coop, its tiny paws crunching on the gravel path. The chickens, curious but cautious, clucked softly as the kitten neared. Whiskers froze, unsure of what to make of the large, feathered creatures. Suddenly, one of the roosters let out a loud crow and flapped its wings, startling the kitten. Whiskers stumbled backward, its fur puffing up as it hissed. But before Clara could intervene, Thunder was already on the move. The horse trotted over, positioning himself between Whiskers and the rooster. He snorted loudly, his powerful presence enough to send the rooster scurrying back into the coop. Clara laughed, shaking her head. "Well, I guess we know who's in charge around here," she said. Whiskers, emboldened by Thunder's intervention, resumed its exploration, occasionally glancing back at its protector. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Thunder and Whiskers grew stronger. Clara often found them together, Whiskers perched on Thunder's back as he grazed, or the kitten curling up in the shade of Thunder's broad frame during the heat of the day. Their friendship became a source of endless delight for Clara, who began documenting their interactions with her sketchbook and camera. The farm, which had always been a quiet and solitary place, began to feel more vibrant. Neighbors stopped by more often, curious about the stories Clara shared of Thunder and Whiskers. Children giggled with delight as they watched the kitten climb onto Thunder's back, balancing precariously before settling down like a tiny rider. One neighbor, a man named Joe who owned a farm down the road, remarked on the unusual bond. "Never seen anything like it," he said one afternoon as he leaned against the fence. "That horse of yours has got a heart as big as this farm." Clara smiled, watching as Whiskers batted at Thunder's tail, the horse standing perfectly still to indulge the kitten's antics. "He's always been special," she said. "But this is something else." One morning, Clara decided to take Thunder out for a short ride around the farm. She saddled him carefully, aware of his age but knowing he still enjoyed the occasional outing. Whiskers, as usual, was close by, watching with wide eyes as Clara prepared Thunder. As Clara mounted Thunder and guided him toward the open field, Whiskers trotted after them, its tiny legs working furiously to keep up. Clara laughed, calling down to the kitten, "You're determined not to be left behind, are you?" When they reached the edge of the field, Clara dismounted and let Thunder graze while she stretched her legs. Whiskers scampered up to them, looking up at Thunder with what Clara could only describe as admiration. The kitten's tail twitched as it crouched low, then sprang onto Thunder's leg, climbing up until it reached his back. Thunder stood perfectly still, his ears flicking as Whiskers settled onto his broad back. Clara pulled out her camera, capturing the moment. "You two are quite the pair," she said, her voice filled with affection. The photo would later become one of Clara's favorites, a symbol of the unexpected friendship that had brought new life to her farm. But life on the farm wasn't without its challenges. One stormy evening, as dark clouds rolled in and the wind picked up, Clara hurried to secure the animals in their shelters. The chickens were safely in their coop, and the goats were huddled in the barn, but Thunder was still outside, grazing near the far fence. Clara grabbed her raincoat and headed out, calling for Thunder as the first drops of rain began to fall. "Come on, boy. Let's get you inside," she shouted over the rising wind. As she approached, she saw Whiskers at Thunder's feet, the kitten looking small and vulnerable against the backdrop of the storm. Thunder stood protectively over the kitten, his body a shield against the wind and rain. Clara's heart ached at the sight. "You two are something else," she said, her voice softening despite the urgency of the moment. She scooped up Whiskers and led Thunder back to the barn, where the three of them waited out the storm together. That night, as the rain pounded on the barn roof and the wind howled outside, Clara sat with Thunder and Whiskers, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The farm, once a place of quiet solitude, had become a haven of warmth and connection. In the weeks that followed, Clara noticed a change in herself as well. She felt lighter, more optimistic, and more connected to the world around her. Thunder and Whiskers had reminded her of the simple joys of life, the beauty of companionship, the power of kindness, and the magic of unexpected bonds. Their story began to spread beyond the farm. Neighbors shared photos and stories of Thunder and Whiskers, and soon Clara was receiving letters and messages from people who had heard about the unlikely duo. Some shared their own stories of interspecies friendships, while others simply expressed how much joy the story had brought them. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a woman named Margaret, who wrote about how the story of Thunder and Whiskers had inspired her to adopt a stray dog she had been feeding outside her home. "Your story reminded me that love and kindness can come in all forms," the letter read. "Thank you for sharing it." Clara read the letter aloud to Thunder and Whiskers one evening, her voice thick with emotion. "You two are making a difference," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "You brought so much more than joy to this farm. You brought hope." The season shifted, and summer settled over the farm in a golden haze of sunlight and warmth. Thunder and Whiskers were inseparable by now, their bond stronger than ever. Clara often found herself marveling at the ways they supported each other. Whiskers, with its playful energy, brought out the youthfulness in Thunder, while Thunder's calm and steady presence gave Whiskers a sense of security. One morning, as Clara tended to her garden, she glanced over at the barnyard and smiled. Thunder stood in his usual spot near the fence, his head lowered to graze, while Whiskers darted around his legs, pouncing on imaginary prey. The kitten's energy was boundless, and Thunder, ever patient, stood perfectly still as Whiskers leapt and swatted at his tail. "You think they've known each other forever," Clara said aloud, wiping her hands on her apron. Her neighbor Joe, who had stopped by to deliver some fresh eggs, chuckled at her comment. "I've never seen anything like it," Joe said, leaning on the fence as he watched the pair. "That kitten acts like it's the king of the farm, and Thunder just lets it." Clara laughed. "It's like they've made a deal. Whiskers keeps Thunder entertained, and Thunder keeps Whiskers safe." Joe nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Funny, isn't it? How animals can teach us so much about kindness and trust. Makes you wonder why people can't always do the same." Clara glanced at Thunder and Whiskers, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe they can," she said, "if they take the time to look." One afternoon, Clara decided to introduce Whiskers to a new challenge, climbing the old oak tree that stood near the barn. The tree's low-hanging branches and sturdy trunk made it the perfect spot for a curious kitten to explore. Clara placed Whiskers at the base of the tree and stepped back, watching as the kitten sniffed at the bark. Whiskers hesitated at first, its tiny claws flexing as it assessed the tree. Then, with a sudden burst of determination, the kitten leapt onto the trunk and began to climb. Clara clapped her hands in encouragement. "That's it, Whiskers. You've got this." Thunder, who had been grazing nearby, lifted his head to watch. His ears twitched as Whiskers scrambled up the tree, its tail swishing with excitement. The kitten made it to the first branch, pausing to look down at Clara and Thunder as if to say, "Did you see that?" Clara laughed, her heart swelling with pride. "Well done, little one. You're braver than I thought." But the moment of triumph was short-lived. As Whiskers climbed higher, the branch beneath it creaked ominously. Clara's smile faded, and she stepped closer to the tree. "Whiskers, come back down," she called, her voice tinged with worry. The kitten, oblivious to the danger, continued to climb. The branch groaned under its weight, and Clara's heart leapt into her throat. "Whiskers," she shouted. Before she could move, Thunder sprang into action. The horse trotted to the base of the tree, positioning himself directly beneath the branch. He raised his head, his powerful neck stretching upward as if to offer Whiskers a safe landing. The branch snapped. Whiskers let out a frightened yowl as it fell, but Thunder was ready. The kitten landed gently on his broad back, its tiny claws gripping his mane for balance. Thunder stood perfectly still, his body steady as a rock. Clara let out a shaky breath, her hand pressed to her chest. "You're a hero, Thunder," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Whiskers, still clinging to Thunder's back, let out a tentative meow. Clara reached up to scoop the kitten into her arms, holding it close as she stroked its fur. "And you, little one, need to be more careful," she said softly. Thunder snorted, his dark eyes watching Clara and Whiskers with what she could only describe as quiet satisfaction. Clara smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "You never cease to amaze me, old boy." The incident with the tree only strengthened the bond between Thunder and Whiskers. The kitten now seemed to view Thunder as its ultimate protector, following the horse everywhere he went. Clara often caught Whiskers nestled against Thunder's side during naps, or riding on his back as he wandered the pasture. Clara began documenting their friendship in earnest, capturing photos and writing stories about their adventures. She started sharing these stories with friends and neighbors, who passed them along to others. Before long, Thunder and Whiskers became minor celebrities in the community, their unusual friendship inspiring smiles and laughter wherever their story was told. One day, Clara received a call from a local journalist who had heard about Thunder and Whiskers. "We'd love to feature them in our paper," the journalist said. "It's such a heartwarming story, and I think our readers could use a little positivity right now." Clara hesitated for a moment, but then she thought about the joy Thunder and Whiskers had brought to her own life and to others. "I'd be happy to share their story," she said. "They've certainly given me plenty to write about." The article was published a week later, accompanied by a photo of Thunder and Whiskers resting in a barnyard, their bond evident in every detail. The response was overwhelming. Clara received letters, phone calls, and even visits from people who had been moved by the story. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a young girl named Lily, who wrote about how the story of Thunder and Whiskers had inspired her to adopt a stray kitten she had found in her neighborhood. "I was scared at first," Lily wrote, "but then I thought about how brave Whiskers was and how kind Thunder was. I want to be like them." Clara read the letter aloud to Thunder and Whiskers one evening, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're making a difference," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "Both of you." As summer turned to autumn, the farm took on a new kind of beauty. The leaves on the trees turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air grew crisp with a promise of cooler days ahead. Clara spent her mornings tending to the animals and her evenings by the fire, often with Whiskers curled in her lap and Thunder resting just outside the window. The bond between the three of them, Clara, Thunder, and Whiskers, had transformed the farm into something magical. It was no longer just a place to live. It was a haven, a sanctuary of kindness and connection. And though Clara knew that time would eventually bring change, she also knew that the lessons Thunder and Whiskers had taught her, the importance of trust, the beauty of unexpected friendships, and the power of love, would stay with her forever. As autumn deepened, the farm became a picturesque canvas of warm hues and soft light. The days were shorter, but Clara cherished the tranquil beauty of the season. Thunder and Whiskers remained at the heart of the farm, their friendship continuing to grow stronger with each passing day. It was as though they were two pieces of a puzzle that had finally found their perfect fit. One particularly crisp morning, Clara decided it was time to prepare the barn for the winter months. She bundled up in her coat and gloves, gathered her tools, and headed outside. Whiskers, as usual, was trailing behind Thunder, weaving in and out between the horse's legs as they walked. "You two are going to make it hard to get any work done," Clara teased, smiling as she reached the barn. Inside, she began stacking fresh hay in Thunder's stall, humming a tune as she worked. Whiskers hopped onto a bale of hay, watching her with wide, curious eyes. Thunder stood at the entrance of the barn, his ears flicking as he surveyed the yard. As Clara worked, her thoughts wandered to how much the farm had changed since Whiskers arrived. What had once been a quiet, almost lonely place was now filled with life and joy. The bond between Thunder and Whiskers had transformed not just the farm, but Clara herself. She felt more connected, more alive, and more grateful for the simple pleasures of each day. Later that afternoon, Clara decided to take a break and sit by the pasture fence. She watched as Thunder grazed lazily in the golden light of the setting sun, with Whiskers perched on his back like a tiny king surveying his domain. The sight never failed to bring a smile to Clara's face. As she sipped her tea, a car pulled into the driveway. Clara turned to see a familiar face, Emma, her neighbor and a teacher at the local elementary school. Emma stepped out of the car, waving warmly as she approached. "Clara, I hope I'm not interrupting," Emma said, her cheeks rosy from the chilly air. Not at all, Clara replied, standing to greet her. What brings you by? Emma glanced toward the pasture, her eyes lighting up as she spotted Thunder and Whiskers. I've been telling my students about Thunder and Whiskers, she said. They're fascinated by the story. I was wondering if you'd be open to having the kids visit the farm sometime. It could be a wonderful lesson about animals, kindness, and connection. Clara's heart swelled at the idea. She loved the thought of sharing the magic of the farm with children, especially if it could teach them something meaningful. I'd love that, she said. Just let me know when, and I'll make sure we're ready. The visit was scheduled for the following week, and Clara spent the days leading up to it preparing the farm. She tidied the barn, set up a small seating area for the children, and even baked cookies for the occasion. Thunder and Whiskers, of course, were blissfully unaware of the excitement to come. When the day arrived, a small bus pulled up to the farm, and a group of wide-eyed children spilled out, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Clara greeted them warmly, her heart melting at their enthusiasm. Welcome to the farm, she said, guiding them toward the barnyard. Today, you're going to meet two very special friends. The children gathered around as Clara introduced them to Thunder and Whiskers. The horse stood tall and calm, his dark eyes gentle as the children approached, while Whiskers perched on a nearby fence post, observing the newcomers with curious intensity. Thunder is the protector, Clara explained, her voice filled with pride. He's strong, steady, and kind. And this little one, she added, gesturing to Whiskers, is his best friend. Whiskers may be small, but he's brave and full of spirit. The children listened intently, their faces lighting up as Clara shared stories about the bond between the two animals. She told them about the day Thunder had shielded Whiskers from the storm, and the time he had caught the kitten when it fell from the tree. When she finished, the children clapped and cheered, their excitement contagious. Can we pet them? One little girl asked, her eyes shining with hope. Of course, Clara said, smiling. But remember to be gentle. The children approached Thunder and Whiskers with careful steps, their hands outstretched. Thunder stood perfectly still, his patience unwavering as the children stroked his coat. Whiskers, meanwhile, allowed a few brave kids to scratch behind his ears, his tiny tail flicking in approval. The visit was a resounding success. The children left the farm with smiles on their faces, their hearts full of the lessons they had learned. Emma thanked Clara profusely, promising to share the story of Thunder and Whiskers with even more students. As the bus pulled away, Clara stood by the fence with Thunder and Whiskers at her side. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the bond between her two unlikely friends had inspired so many. You've done something special here, she said softly, stroking Thunder's mane. Both of you. As winter approached, the farm began to change. The trees shed their leaves, and the first frost coated the ground in a delicate shimmer. Clara prepared the barn for the colder months, making sure Thunder's stall was warm and cozy and setting up a little corner for Whiskers to curl up in. Despite the chill in the air, Thunder and Whiskers continued their daily routines. Clara often found them in the pasture, Thunder grazing while Whiskers trotted alongside him, pouncing on patches of snow. Their bond remained as strong as ever, a source of comfort and joy during the long, quiet days of winter. One evening, as Clara sat by the fire, Whiskers curled in her lap and Thunder resting just outside the window, she reflected on how much her life had changed since the kitten arrived. She thought about the lessons they had taught her, the importance of trust, the beauty of connection, and the power of kindness. They say animals don't need words to communicate, she mused aloud. And I believe it. You've both shown me more than words ever could. Whiskers purred softly, its tiny body warm against Clara's hands. Outside, Thunder shifted, his dark silhouette framed by the soft glow of the barn light. Clara felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, filling her heart to the brim. As the snow fell gently outside, Clara made a promise to herself. She would continue to share the story of Thunder and Whiskers with anyone who would listen. Their friendship was a reminder of what truly mattered in life: kindness, compassion, and the connections that brought meaning to even the simplest moments. And as the farm settled into the quiet of winter, Clara knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, surrounded by the love and warmth of two extraordinary friends. The farm lay, blanketed in snow, its white expanse glistening under the pale winter sun. Clara wrapped herself in a thick coat and stepped onto the porch, her breath visible in the frosty air. Despite the chill, her heart felt warm as she spotted Thunder and Whiskers near the barn. Whiskers was perched on Thunder's back as usual, his tail flicking with contentment. You two don't seem to mind the cold, do you? Clara called, walking toward them. Thunder snorted softly, his ears swiveling toward her, while Whiskers meowed in greeting. Clara chuckled, kneeling down to offer Whiskers a gentle scratch behind the ears. "You've made quite the team," she said, her voice filled with affection. "I don't think I've ever seen a friendship like yours." Thunder lowered his head, nuzzling Clara's shoulder in response. She smiled, her hand resting on his broad neck. "You've taught me a lot, she continued. About patience, kindness, and finding joy in the little things. The bond between Thunder and Whiskers had become the heart of Clara's farm, and she couldn't imagine life without them. They had turned her quiet, solitary days into something extraordinary, filling each moment with love and wonder. As the days grew colder, Clara noticed that Thunder was beginning to slow down. At 27 years old, the horse had lived a long and full life, but the signs of aging were becoming more apparent. His steps were heavier, and he spent more time resting in the barn, his energy no longer what it once was. Clara did everything she could to keep him comfortable, providing extra bedding in his stall and ensuring he had plenty of warm mash to eat. Whiskers, ever the loyal companion, stayed by Thunder's side, curling up against his flank to keep him warm. The sight of the tiny kitten nestled against the massive horse never failed to tug at Clara's heart. One evening, as a gentle snow fell outside, Clara sat in the barn with Thunder and Whiskers. She stroked Thunder's mane, her voice soft as she spoke. "You've given me so much, old friend," she said. "More than I ever thought possible. And I promise I'll take care of you, just like you've taken care of us." Whiskers purred softly, his small body pressed against Thunder's side. Clara smiled, her heart full of gratitude for the bond that had brought so much light into her life. Winter passed slowly, and by the time spring arrived, the farm was alive with new growth. The trees blossomed with fresh leaves, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers. Thunder seemed to perk up with the change in season, his steps a little lighter as he grazed in the pasture. Whiskers, as energetic as ever, darted through the tall grass, pouncing on insects and chasing butterflies. Thunder watched him with calm, steady gaze, his protective instincts as strong as ever. Clara spent her days tending to the garden, repairing fences, and caring for the animals. But no matter how busy she was, she always made time for Thunder and Whiskers. Their friendship remained a constant source of joy, a reminder of the simple, beautiful connections that made life meaningful. One afternoon, as Clara worked in the garden, she noticed a car pulling into the driveway. It was Emma, the school teacher, accompanied by a small group of students. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to greet them. "Hello, Clara," Emma said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "We were hoping to visit the farm again. The kids have been asking about Thunder and Whiskers ever since our last trip." Clara beamed, delighted by their arrival. "Of course. Come on in. I'm sure Thunder and Whiskers will be happy to see you." The children rushed to the barnyard, their laughter filling the air as they spotted Thunder and Whiskers. Clara watched with pride as the kids approached the pair, their excitement contagious. Thunder stood patiently as the children stroked his coat, while Whiskers pranced around their feet, soaking up the attention. Clara shared stories about Thunder and Whiskers, emphasizing the lessons they had taught her about kindness and connection. The children listened intently, their faces glowing with admiration. One little boy raised his hand. "Do you think Thunder and Whiskers love each other?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Clara smiled, her heart swelling at the question. "I do," she said. "In their own way. They've shown me what love looks like, caring for each other, protecting each other, and always being there, no matter what." The children nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Clara hoped that the bond between Thunder and Whiskers would inspire them to approach the world with the same kindness and understanding. As the years went by, the story of Thunder and Whiskers continued to touch lives far beyond the farm. Clara began receiving letters from people across the country who had heard about the pair and wanted to share their own stories of unlikely friendships and acts of kindness. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a young woman named Sarah, who wrote about how the story of Thunder and Whiskers had inspired her to start a sanctuary for rescue animals. "Your story reminded me of the power of connection," Sarah wrote. "Thunder and Whiskers showed me that even the smallest acts of kindness can make a big difference." Clara read the letter aloud to Thunder and Whiskers one evening, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've changed more lives than you'll ever know," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. Thunder snorted softly, his dark eyes warm and steady, while Whiskers purred against his side. In that moment, Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they had shared. One crisp autumn morning, Clara sat on the porch, watching the golden leaves fall gently to the ground. Thunder and Whiskers were in the pasture. The kitten perched on the horse's back as they soaked up the warmth of the sun. Clara sighed, her heart full as she reflected on the years they had spent together. Thunder and Whiskers had brought so much joy and love to her life, transforming the farm into a place of healing and connection. As she watched them, a soft breeze carried the sound of a distant neigh, a reminder of the many lives Thunder had touched. Clara smiled, knowing that their bond would be remembered not just on the farm, but in the hearts of everyone who had heard their story. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the farm in a warm, golden glow, Clara felt at peace, surrounded by the love of two extraordinary friends. As time passed, the seasons came and went, marking the rhythms of life on the farm. Clara's days were filled with the familiar routines of caring for her animals, tending her garden, and enjoying the simple pleasures of rural life. But no matter how busy she was, Thunder and Whiskers remained the centerpiece of her world, a constant reminder of the beauty of connection. Thunder, now nearing 30 years old, had grown slower with age. His once dark coat had begun to gray around a muzzle, and his steps were more measured. Clara did everything she could to ensure his comfort, adjusting his diet, providing extra bedding in the barn, and spending long evenings by his side. Whiskers, meanwhile, had grown into a sleek, agile cat, though he retained the playful spirit of a kitten. He rarely left Thunder's side, often curling up next to him during naps or perching on his back as they roamed the pasture. Their bond was as strong as ever, an unbreakable connection that had become the heart and soul of the farm. One brisk autumn morning, Clara decided to take Thunder and Whiskers on a slow walk around the farm, something they hadn't done in a while. The air was cool and crisp, and the golden leaves crunched underfoot as they strolled along the fence line. Clara smiled as she watched Whiskers dart ahead, chasing falling leaves before circling back to Thunder. "You're still full of energy, aren't you, little one?" she said, her voice warm. Thunder snorted softly, his ears flicking as if in agreement. They reached the old oak tree near the barn, its branches now bare and stark against the bright blue sky. Clara paused, resting her hand on Thunder's neck as she looked up at the tree. Memories of Whiskers' daring climb and Thunder's heroic catch came flooding back, and she chuckled softly. "You've always been a protector," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. Thunder lowered his head, nuzzling Clara's shoulder gently. Whiskers, sensing the tender moment, leapt onto Thunder's back, his tail curling as he settled into his usual perch. For a long time, the three of them stood there, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the farm. Clara felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that no matter what the future held, the bond they shared would endure. As winter approached, Clara began preparing the farm for the colder months. She reinforced the barn's walls, stocked up on feed, and made sure every animal had a warm place to sleep. Thunder's stall was given special attention, with thick layers of fresh straw and a soft blanket draped over the rails. Whiskers, ever attentive, seemed to sense that Thunder needed extra care. The cat rarely left his side, often curling up against his flank to keep him warm. Clara couldn't help but marvel at their relationship. It was as though Whiskers had taken on the role of caretaker, mirroring the protection Thunder had once offered him. One evening, as the first snowflakes began to fall, Clara sat in the barn with Thunder and Whiskers. The air was filled with the soft rustle of straw and the gentle sound of Thunder's breathing. Clara stroked his mane, her voice quiet as she spoke. "You've been my rock, old friend," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Thunder's dark eyes met hers, filled with a depth of understanding that words could never capture. Whiskers purred softly, his tiny body a comforting presence against Thunder's side. In that moment, Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they had shared. Winter arrived in full force, blanketing the farm in a thick layer of snow. The days were short, and the nights were long and cold, but the warmth of Thunder and Whiskers' bond kept Clara's spirits high. She often found them nestled together in the barn, their quiet companionship a source of comfort during the harsh season. One particularly cold evening, Clara sat by the fire, sipping tea as she flipped through an old photo album. The pages were filled with pictures of Thunder and Whiskers, Thunder grazing the pasture with Whiskers perched on his back, the two of them resting under the shade of the oak tree, and countless moments of joy and connection. As she turned the pages, Clara was struck by the realization of how much they had given her. Their friendship had not only brought new life to the farm, but it also taught her the importance of love, trust, and resilience. They had become more than just animals, they were family. As the winter months stretched on, Clara noticed that Thunder was slowing down even more. His appetite waned, and he spent most of his days resting in the barn. Whiskers stayed by his side constantly, curling up next to him to keep him warm and occasionally licking his muzzle as if to comfort him. Clara did everything she could to make Thunder's final days as peaceful as possible. She stayed with him for hours, stroking his mane and speaking to him softly. She knew the time was coming, but the thought of saying goodbye was almost too much to bear. One morning, as the sun rose over the snowy horizon, Clara found Thunder lying peacefully in his stall, Whiskers curled against his side. She knelt beside him, her heart breaking as she realized he had passed away in the night. Tears streamed down her face as she stroked his mane, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Thunder," she whispered. "For everything." Whiskers let out a soft, mournful meow, his small body pressed tightly against Thunder's. Clara gently scooped him up, holding him close as she wept. In the days that followed, Clara worked to honor Thunder's memory. She buried him beneath the old oak tree, a place where he had spent so many happy moments with Whiskers. She marked the spot with a simple wooden plaque that read, "Thunder, protector, friend, family." Whiskers, though visibly grieving, remained a source of comfort for Clara. The little cat stayed near the oak tree, often curling up on the plaque as if keeping watch over Thunder's resting place. Clara found solace in Whiskers' presence, their shared grief bringing them even closer. As spring returned to the farm, so did new life. The trees blossomed, the air filled with the songs of birds, and the fields came alive with color. Clara found herself spending more time outside, tending to the garden, and caring for the animals. Whiskers, now fully grown but still as playful as ever, was her constant companion. Though Thunder was gone, his spirit remained a palpable presence on the farm. Clara often felt it in the quiet moments, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the soft neigh of a distant horse, the warmth of the sun on her face. His memory was a reminder of the profound impact he had made, not just on her life but on the lives of everyone who had heard his story. One sunny afternoon, as Clara sat by the oak tree with Whiskers in her lap, she reflected on the journey they had shared. Thunder and Whiskers had taught her that love could transcend boundaries, that even the unlikeliest of friendships could change the world. As Whiskers purred softly, Clara smiled, her heart full of gratitude. "You'll carry his legacy, won't you?" she said, stroking the cat's soft fur. "You'll remind everyone of the love and kindness he brought to this farm." Whiskers blinked up at her, his amber eyes filled with a quiet understanding. Clara felt a sense of peace wash over her, knowing that Thunder's story would live on, not just in her memories, but in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by his extraordinary friendship with a tiny, abandoned kitten. And as the sun set over the farm, casting the fields in a warm, golden light, Clara knew that their story was far from over. It would continue to inspire, to heal, and to remind the world of the simple, beautiful truth that love, in all its forms, was the greatest gift of all.